فرج عنا همومنا وغمومنا فرجنا عنا برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. اللهم اجعلنا ورجعنا وانفسنا واهلنا واولادنا واموالنا وكل شيء اعطيتنا. اللهم اجعلنا واياهم في كافك وامانك وعياذك من كل شيطان مريض وجبار عنيد وذي بغي وذي حسد ومن شر كل شر مدير. اللهم جملنا بالعافية والسلام ووفقنا بالتقوى والاستقامة وأعنا من شر إنك سميع الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا وأولادنا ومشايخنا وإخواننا في الدين وأصحابنا ولمن أحبنا فيك ولمن أحسن إلينا والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات يا رب العالمين. وصل اللهم على عبدك ورسولك سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ارزقنا كمال المتابعة له ظاهرا وباطنا في العافية والسلامة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد عبده ورسوله النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. نوين التعليم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث بالتمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وصحبه وسلم والدعاء إلى والدلالة على الهدى ابتغاء وجهه سبحانه وتعالى وثبه قربه. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد نورك الساري ومددك الجاري واجمعنا به في كل أطارنا وعلى آله وصحبه النور عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته عدد كل حرف كتب وكتب وقرئ ويقرأ وسمع ويسمع ورؤي ويرى أبد الآبدين ودهر الداهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, continuing with our lesson, we stopped yesterday halfway during the last talk, which was transcribed. Obviously, this entire book, Tawjīh Nabīh, is a collection of talks and lessons which were given by Habib Umar, which our Shaykh Fahmi bin Ali bin Ubaidun then gathered, compiled. He put it in book form, and then he read the entire book to Habib Umar, right, to check that everything is being correctly transcribed. And then obviously it was generally in the beginning, many of our mashayikh, the great mashayikh obviously, the likes of Imam al-Haddad and Shaykh Abu Bakr bin Salim, Habib Bakr al-Adani also, who passed away recently, they understand the duty that they have and the responsibility and the trust that they have while they are on this earth. And so their lives are not just getting up one day and, okay, let's see how we can do good and khair. They understand that the lifespan that they've been given has been given to them for a particular purpose. And so we notice with Habib Bakr al-Adani as well, and also with Habib Umar, these talks and these lectures and the type of language they would speak in the beginning of the da'wah and in the beginning of when they started to train and teach students, it was foundational language, meaning when they taught, it was done in a sense in which the rules and the foundations of their methodology was being erected. So what happens after 15, 20 years, even with Habib Bakr al-Adani as well, sometimes people that maybe only found out about him much later will tell him, Habib, we need this type of information, or if this can be, if you can talk about this particular topic. And he'll say, we spoke about this 20 years ago. Go back to the recordings of the past. Because every time when there are new generations or new people that come and connect with the mashayikh, then their needs so for example, someone that connects to a sheikh 20 years later, their needs are the needs that those that were with the sheikh 20 years before that, right, had. And so here the ideal thing for these people would do is to take from the students of these mashayikh, to bring them up to scratch, or to do khidmah of the sheikh in a way in which you take the foundational teachings and you put it in a form which is then easily accessible for people that will connect with the sheikh later meaning in their life, or even for generations to come. Sometimes the real benefit of a Shaykh is only seen after they have passed away. Obviously, Habib Umar is one of the Mashayikh that live in this generation. They are the first of the scholars and the teachers and the masters of the spiritual path that are living in the age of technology. It didn't exist before. And so their teachings are easily and widely available for everyone to know about. Much of the works, for example, of Imam al-Haddad only became known, people knew about him during his lifetime, but the ability to actually take his entire silsila, right, and read it from cover to cover only became available afterwards. It means after his lifetime, they had to gather all his works, compile it, collect it, and it was still in manuscript form, right? And then if you wanted to send a copy to someone, you had to find someone, a copyist who would copy everything from scratch. And so the information wasn't easily available. Even the biography of Imam al-Haddad, what we read, for example, in the book Sufi Sage of Arabia, it's taken from different biographies of Imam al-Haddad. One of the most famous of the biographies of Imam al-Haddad, I think the name of the book is Bahjatul Fu'ad. Bahjatul Fu'ad was written by Habib Muhammad bin Sumayt, who was one of the students of Imam al-Haddad. After Imam al-Haddad passed away, he began to collect the information from Habib Ahmad bin Zayn al-Habashi and all the other different people that had benefited from Imam al-Haddad. Right? And then he wrote a subsequent book to this, Bahjatul Fu'ad, which was a book which just mentions the names of the people, of the most significant people that were students of Imam al-Haddad. Right? The first book that he wrote, which was the compilation of just the biography of Imam al-Haddad, took him 15 years to compile. So someone who wanted to get a clear picture of who Imam al-Haddad was, and they didn't live with him or weren't in touch with his students, would only be able to have done that after 15 years. Right? And then afterwards, obviously, more people wrote. Then obviously when Imam al-Haddad's, the biographies that were written about his sons and his grandsons, because his sons and grandsons would obviously also have information that wasn't previously available. So likewise, they say as times go, the information increases, but the benefit of the suhbah of the Shaykh is not there. So likewise, Imam al-Bukhari, when he compiled, or many hadith scholars, when they compiled the hadith works, in terms of knowledge, in terms of information, many of the hadith scholars had more information about the Prophet ﷺ than even some Sahaba. Some Sahaba only spent a very short time in the company of the Prophet ﷺ, and then they went out to different lands. So in reality, they might have only heard, for example, 100 hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, 100 sayings of the Prophet ﷺ in their interactions with him. And then when they went out, perhaps as other Sahaba traveled or news traveled, we're talking about Sahaba that met the Prophet ﷺ. But now Imam al-Bukhari, in his time, and the scholars of hadith, what would they do? They travel throughout the lands, meeting all the different scholars who took from the different Sahaba, and they compiled. So we have one particular scholar, and he's gathered 100,000 ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So he's got more knowledge in terms of the information, but he doesn't have the suhbah, because the suhbah has the direct transfer from heart to heart in the spiritual states. And the importance of suhbah is so significant that when we revere the Sahaba, what was the, like for example, you find a name given to Imam al-Ghazali, Hujjatul Islam, he is the proof of the religion. Right? And so they'll say Allamatul Dunya, he was the scholar of the entire dunya. But for the Sahaba, when we refer to them, we only refer to them as Sahaba. What does Sahaba mean? Companions. They had the suhbah, they had the companionship of the Prophet ﷺ. And that is enough. People that understand the significance of that realize that the Sahaba, it is enough for them to actually be known as Sahaba. In trying to drive this point home, some of the Mashayikh would say that when they speak of the spiritual path and the ability to meet with the Prophet ﷺ in a wakeful state, and this is possible, and it is a sanctioned view in the manhaj of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, unanimously across the boards. All of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah are unanimous that it is possible for a person to meet the Prophet ﷺ in a wakeful state. Just as the Prophet ﷺ met the Prophets in the Isra and Mi'raj. They had passed into the realm of the Barzakh, but he who was still in the realm of this world was able to interact with them. And there's many stories and experiences of people, and it reaches the state of mutawatir. Mutawatir meaning that it's an accepted fact. Besides that, it is in our in our Sharia, and in all the madahib this is possible. They would say in order for a person to meet, Imam Sha'rani mentions this, in order to meet the Prophet ﷺ in a wakeful state, a person has to traverse 124,000 veils of light. That's over and above all the veils of darkness and the ego, and however long it takes to get past it. And sometimes it takes a lifetime to get past the veils of darkness. But he's got to traverse 124,000 veils of light before he's able to meet the Prophet ﷺ in a wakeful state. Again, just to drive home the point, then they would say, in order, the state of the Prophet ﷺ is his state higher than that of the angels or lower? Unanimous, the Prophet ﷺ is higher than that of the angels. Higher than the state of Jibreel alayhi salam or not? Of course, right? In the Isra and Mi'raj, the Prophet ﷺ was, when he was traveling, Jibreel alayhi salam told him, like, this is my point, I cannot go further. And he says, is this a place where a friend leaves his friend, right? And Jibreel alayhi salam, the famous word already say, if I have to take one step forward, I will be burned, I will be incinerated. But if you take your step forward, you will traverse the pathways, right? And then obviously the Isra, the stories mention how much further than the Prophet ﷺ traveled, the distance between the 70,000 veils between the Sidrat al-Muntaha and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And 70,000 veils, the distance between each veil is the distance of 500 years of travel of the time of the hereafter. And the veils themselves are 500 years of travel, being taken from one angel to the next through all these 70,000 different veils. And obviously, when we speak of 70,000, the Prophet ﷺ is just trying to make us comprehend to some extent. And so, in order to see the Prophet ﷺ in a wakeful state, and his state is bigger than that of Jibreel alayhi salam, a person has to be able to bear seeing Jibreel alayhi salam first, in his normal form, not in the form of him coming in a human being. And we know when the Prophet ﷺ first saw Jibreel alayhi salam in the heavens with his 600 wings spread from east to west, right? Who can bear that? Which human being can bear that? And so meeting the Prophet ﷺ in a wakeful state is an extremely rare thing, right? And it requires a very, very high spiritual state. The person has to traverse, as Sha'rani says, 124,000 veils of light. That is why one of the du'as, the greatest du'a that the lovers of the Prophet ﷺ make is Allahumma hannin alayna ruhur rasul. Make his soul, hannin means, hanan is like how a mother would treat her child. So for example, you might find a mother, she's a teacher in school, and she might be very strict and a disciplinarian. But when she comes home with her child and her baby, how is she? She's a different person. She's very caring and compassionate. And they ask for that care and compassion from the Prophet ﷺ, in that we want to be able to interact with him, but not in his grandeur and his awe, in his jalali state, in his mali state, where it's like a father and son interacting. And so the Sahaba, Imam Sha'rani says, by the mere fact of accepting Islam and seeing the Prophet ﷺ, they traversed all of those 124,000 veils in an instant. And look at the destruction that the disbelievers of Makkah and the Quraysh had the opportunity to traverse all of those 124,000 veils in one instant. And they had the opportunity for their names to be remembered until eternity, to be set upon them, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, to be held in reverence, and all till the day of Qiyamah. And look, when Allah decides destruction for a person, but they didn't believe. They had the greatest opportunity and they lost it. And so the Sahaba have an extremely revered status in the eyes of Islam, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself in the Quran mentioned, radiyallahu ta'ala, radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. And even the mistakes and the small lapses that might have happened, Allah says He has given it for them. Even for example, in the Battle of Uhud, those archers that fell into the disobedience of the Prophet ﷺ, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He has forgiven them. He has forgiven them for it. And so therefore the Sahaba are our point of reference in how we relate to the Prophet ﷺ. So the last lesson, Habib Umar was speaking about correcting our faults. Okay, standing at the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, imagining ourselves to be lower than all those people whom we convey the message to. We are encouraged to convey the message to all those around us, but at the same time believing that they are better than us. Someone asked, how can How can we believe that we are better than different people? For example, children. Imam Ghazali speaks about this in the Bidayatul Hidayah. If you are looking at someone that is younger than you, then you should imagine that this person has sinned or fallen into less disobedience than I have. If I have a long lifespan, it means I've committed more sins. If a person is elder than me, then we have to think that they have committed more or they have done more good deeds than I have. And if the person is the peer, then you need to think, we don't know what action this person has done, which is so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah will forgive them for all their sins. You know the story of the Bani Israel. The Prophet ﷺ spoke about the prostitute who gave water to a dog to drink. She was in the vilest of sins, but one action which she did, on account of that Allah forgave her. We don't know which action of ours Allah will take us to account for, just as that woman who was a good woman, but she kept the cat tied, right, and not allowing it to go out and seek its food, and the cat died. On account of that, she went to the hellfire. And the other woman, it was told in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ that she stands awake at night in prayer and she fasts during the day, but she backbites about her neighbors. The Prophet says she's in the hellfire. So we don't know what good deeds, or we don't know what bad deed we have done, and on account of that we will be thrown into the hellfire, especially the sins of our tongues. The Prophet ﷺ said a person will speak a word, right, of goodness, not even realizing it, on account of which he will be elevated to the highest of stations. And a person will speak a word, right, an evil word or a sin, not realizing it's a sin, and on account of that he'll be thrown into the depths of hell. The manifestations of that word will only become apparent to that person at the time of death. And so therefore no one can make a claim, or no one can think that they are better than anyone else until the time of death, and they see their status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in paradise as well, we know that those that are on a higher level will be able to see those below them. But those that are on a lower level will not be able to see those that are higher than them. And so every person in paradise will think that they are at the highest level. Right? And that is why there'll be no ill feelings between the people of Jannah, because everyone will think that they are the closest and the highest in the stages of paradise. And then Habib mentioned that according to the person's intention and their determination, right, in carrying this message, that is the fruit of that determination and action, and the effect that it will have on people. Then Habib carries on and says, لِهَذَا كَانَ أُنَاسٌ بِنَوَايَاهُمْ وَهِمَمِهِمْ حَوَّلُوا بُلْدَانَهُمْ إِلَى خَيْرِ حَالٍ. And for this reason, there were people who, due to their pure intentions and their great himma and determinations, they converted the entire countries into better states. We know the story of they call in the Wali Songo, the 9 Kolia that traveled from Hadramaut to Indonesia, and on account of them the whole of Indonesia became Muslim. The whole East Asia became Muslim because of the efforts of just a few people. We have the stories of recently Habib Ahmad al-Haddad, who in Africa, tribes and tribes in the hundreds of thousands accepted Islam at his hands because of their pure intentions and their determination. وَوَصَّلَ بِهِمْ قَوْمٌ كَثِيرٌ. They connected many people. وَهَكَذَا كَانَ سَيْدُنَا عُمَرْ إِذَا أَرْسَلَ أَحَدٌ يُصْلِحُ بَيْنَ مُتَنَازِعِينَ. And likewise Sayyidina Umar, when he used to send someone to reconcile between people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, when he speaks about the husband and wife, and if they are differing and you fear that there is now going to be a separation between husband and wife, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Send that they should choose an arbitrator from her side, or an arbitrator from his side, or they both should choose an arbitrator to reconcile between them. And then Allah says, إِيُّرِدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. If they both desire to reconcile, Allah will cause reconciliation to happen between them, right? So Sayyidina Umar would send this person to reconcile between two people. And if he came back, فَرَجَعَ يَقُولْ لَهُ مَا رَضُوا أَوْ مَصْطَلَحُوا فَيَعْلُهُ بِالدُّرَّةِ. So this person, Sayyidina Umar sends him and says, go and reconcile between these two people. And he comes back and he tells Sayyidina Umar that they don't want to reconcile, they're not agreeing with each other. What would Sayyidina Umar do? He'll hit this person. The one that he sent, he'll hit him with a stick. And he would tell him, have you not heard the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, مَا تَسْمَعُ قَوْلَ اللَّهِ إِن يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمْ. That if they desired right, to reconcile, and they wanted to reconcile. Therefore, they sent word to Sayyidina Umar to send someone to be an arbitrator between them. If they desire reconciliation, Allah will unite their hearts. So Sayyidina Umar used to hold him accountable that your intention and your determination was not correct. And because the intention and determination was not correct, the way you went about the reconciliation was not appropriate. And so therefore, the blame is on who? The blame is on the ones who do the da'wah, not because people don't want to accept or people are not ready. The blame is on us. If we go and you're trying to convey the message to someone or help someone as well, or take them out of a bad state into a good state, and they don't respond, it's not because that person is evil or that person is not listening or that person is proud and arrogant. Even though that might be the case, the blame has to be on ourselves. Right? We are not the ones who are sincere. And there's many stories that I've told even of brothers that would go out in da'wah, for example, go knock on the door of someone, right? Because, and we hear the stories also with the brothers that come from Palestine, right, back in the day. In many of the countries of the Arab world where after colonialism, right, the whole purpose of the colonialist project is to disconnect people from their deen. And so there was a period of time in which many Arabs and Muslims themselves were living very, very un-Islamic lives. Right? Some of them might not be even performing salah. And so they would go knock on the door just to visit. They're not in the sense of, oh, you know what, we are coming for da'wah. Just knock on the door to try and visit neighbor, bring a gift. Knocks on the door, the guy opens the door, sees him, immediately closes the door in his face. Does the guy get upset? He goes back to the masjid, he reads 2 rakats of salah, he makes istighfar, he says, Allah, perhaps my sincerity wasn't accepted. Perhaps I wasn't sincere enough. Right? And he goes back again and he knocks on the guy, opens the door, punches him in the face. His nose starts bleeding. Right? Does he get upset? No. Goes back to the masjid, takes wudu, makes dua, cries to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if there's any fault in what I'm doing then, and the third time he goes, right, and he knocks on the door, this person is completely changed. Opens the door, welcomes him in, he's prepared something for him, right? Who changed his heart? And so when we do da'wah, they would say, when you want to be involved in da'wah, if you're not crying for people at night, don't waste your time in the day. Because if you are depending on your own strategies and your own charisma or your own way of talking or thinking you can change these people, then you are still full of yourself. If you aren't spending time for the person at night, raising the name in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, then don't waste your time the day with them. Because then you are depending on your own self. And if you are spending your nights raising their names in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and every person will have their own language and their own signs that they get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Sometimes you make a dua and you know for sure that this dua is accepted. Right? Sooner or later, it's just a matter of time. And if you're making such du'as for people and you get those signs that this dua is accepted, then you might not even need to go and do da'wah for that person. Right? And the true, sincere people of Allah is once they know that their du'as are accepted, they'll even now make a plan for other people to go and do the da'wah. And those people will think that it's because of their work. And so the true people that are cause of the rectification of the ummah are those who are knocking on the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at night. And then in the day they don't mind who gets the credit, who's got the big YouTube channels, who's got all the activities and the organizations and everything. But where's the first door? The first door that needs to be knocked on. This is why Umar as well, when he would do these big ibtihalat on Thursday nights in the Mawlids as well, right? Only to teach people the importance of dua. And when the mashayikh do something, it's not because they want to show off. Everything that they do in public is a lesson to people. So even if the way they would, for example, they would have ibadah that they do in private, and that's between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what they manifest for people, or do it in front of people, there is a lesson in that. Right? And what we need to learn. So for example, someone's been listening to and watching how the mashayikh make dua, they need to learn that is how dua needs to be made in this day and this age. And if you are still in your private moments making dua to Allah and just find this here and there distracted, then you haven't actually learned how to make dua. And when they make dua like that, it says, mentioning, right, the effects that due to this gathering and due to this dua, Allah will cause clouds of mercy to raise, which will then go on to distant lands, and the blessings will fall on people that are not even Muslim, but they will now become Muslim, and in a few years' time you'll see them in this gathering. Right? But there might be someone else that person becomes Islam, accepts Islam because of some other person, or he sees something on the internet or whatever. One of our brothers from South Africa as well, Abu Bakr Engelbrecht, he's from a place called Vredendal in Cape Town, right? He came to Tarim. We met him when he came there. Someone posted his story on Facebook. Someone sent me the clip of his story, right? He was normal, non-Muslim, working. He came to Joburg, he was working, going about his life. He's in a very bad state. Goes to sleep one day, and he sees himself in the desert, and there's people around the fire, and they're dressed in thawb, turbans, right? But the very particular style of dress which is representative of the people of Tarim. And he sees them, and he's wondering who's there. And then one of the people call him, if I remember the story correctly. And as he goes, this person goes and gives him a huge hug. He says he feels something happening. He wakes up and he's just in tears, in tears, in tears. And he gets up the next day. He was staying in in Greenside. The closest masjid he could go to was the Greenside Masjid. He goes there. He knocks on the door. It's about Asr time. They have the afternoon madrasa. So one of the teachers, Molanas, comes and is like, and ahlan wa sahlan, welcome. He says, I don't know why I'm here, but I just feel I have to be here, right? Because he's looking now for people that are Muslims. He knew in his dream that these are. And so the Imam comes, speaks to him about Islam. He ends up accepting Islam, alhamdulillah. He ends up attending the masjid, and one of the family members, alhamdulillah, took him in. They had like an outhouse, and they allowed him to stay. They used to provide him his food. And 2 or 3 months, after a few months, one of his friends told him, hey, you know what, there's a Shaykh coming down from Yemen to South Africa. Do you want to attend the programs? And he says yes, and he ends up going for the program. And when he sees Habib Umar, what does he say? This is the person I saw. This is the person I saw in my dream. Right? They're sorting out the Ummah, and they are in. And they're sorting out people in South Africa, and they are in. And they are in Yemen. Right? And this is the ri'ayah, this is the inayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need the physical means. We need to know the power of our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the power of dua. And that is why the Prophet said, ad-du'a mukhul ibadah. When we look and we notice the awliya, that if they start making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they can go on for hours and hours and hours. Sometimes we'll be visiting on the way to the ziyarah of Nabīh, we'll stop at Zambal, we stop at Shaykh bin Salim, and then you go. And sometimes the ziyarah is planned. So for example, we leave on a Thursday night at like 11 o'clock at night. So we're going to get there, do all the visitations. For us, okay, there's to be time for sleeping. Obviously, they don't sleep, right? Habib Ahmad Zain al-Habashi, he mentions about Imam al-Haddad. He says, for the last 16 years that I was with him in the Sha'b of Nabīh Hud alayhi salam, I did not see him sleep for the entire 4 or 5 days, or however long. They didn't sleep. He never used to sleep at night. Actually, Habib Ahmad al-Habashi mentions he didn't sleep at all during those days, 3 or 4 days. So the students are expecting that the visit will be, like relatively quick, nothing. And so you're visiting there, and Habib is there, Shaykh Bakr bin Salim, and he's making dua and Fatiha, and then he's making dua. Khalas. Now the whole hour goes, and he's lost in dua, and he's lost ibtihal, and the students say, Allah, Ya Allah, he's making dua. Right? Because when they lift their hands, the entire heavens starts to say, Ameen. And when they lift their hands, right? When the awliya lift their hands, then you know that dua is now accepted. And these are experiential things. When you spend time in their company, you might taste some of these things for snippets of your life, snippets of your moments in the year, or whatever it is, just to get a feel of what they live constantly, right? 24/7. They're in a different form of existence. And when you spend time in their company, then it's like a waterfall. You'll get what do you say? The splashes. You go to the Victoria Falls, right? You're standing there at a distance, but you can get just splashes. Imagine those that are standing under the waterfall. And that's why Shaykh Bakr bin Salim would say, when you're trying to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, someone that's trying to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through their own efforts, it's like someone trying to draw water from a well with a bucket. How much effort you've got to make. He says, but if you merely spend time in the company of the awliya, then you're standing under a waterfall. Because they've already reached. They have to just merely look at you and they lift you up to where they are from. But you want to now try and do your own efforts, like drawing that water from a well. And it's also difficult from the nafs, because the ego that wants to even manifest itself in its ibadah, in its word, and wants to get credit to say, I am able to do something, or I am worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am doing this dhikr. And the way is to say that I have nothing. Siru illahi urujan wa makasir. Traverse to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala broken, right? Crippled and broken. Urujan means crippled, you cripple. You make mistakes, khalas, we're going. Because it's not to what you do, Allah just wants to see effort. And when He decides to accept you, then that's when your life changes. And so if you think that I'm going to start, when I'm in this particular state, or when I'm able to do this and that, then I'm going to do da'wah, or then I'm going to do this ibadah, this person is still deluded, right? It's not about ourselves. It's only about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you realize that it's only about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it also doesn't matter who Allah chooses. And you actually get sometimes the people of Allah are happy that Allah manifests His khair, especially when it comes to da'wah, on the hands of other people. Because it means they saved from a lot of the effects that come with being in the public eye. Many of mashayikh, it would take a long while for them to start doing what they do in the public sphere. Because they know that this comes with other distractions. Right? To spend time with people is a distraction from the time spent with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then that also becomes a form of ibadah, the form of rahmah, and they are given the compassion and the mercy and the concern and the care. One of the people in Tarim, one of the big mashayikh that we know, whenever you see him, he's always got students at his house, right? Always. And he's never upset that any student will come visit him at any time of the day and night. And he's someone who is from the Ahl Bayt family, one of the very great Ahl Bayt families as well. And I was actually amazed, because what we notice sometimes our mashayikh is they're very particular about their time. And the students would come or they read. And he sits and he'll ask and he remembers. For example, if my family, my brother-in-law and my family and parents came to Tarim 2015, till today, he asks and he takes each one by name. How's this one and how's that one and how's that one and how's that one? And he remembers. So one day even we were in the shop of Nabīh and we were driving out. And then he sees some students outside who greeted him. So he said, stop the car. And he went and he talked to them. And now we're leaving after a long day, it's late at night. And he starts talking to them and they're asking questions and they're very happy. And he lets them finish a whole half an hour. Then he gets into the car and go. So after I was like, Habib, so I said, like, Habib, what, in terms of your path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do you find has been the thing that gives you the biggest spiritual assistance? They would say madad. Everyone knows in a certain way, Allah opens up different doors. For example, a person who has wealth, they would find that when they use their wealth and it's pleasing to Allah, feeding the poor and needy, this opens up doors for them. Another person, if they treat their family well, they control their anger. And so I asked him, and when I asked the question, I could see that he appreciated the question. And he says, for me, when I spend time with the students, just making the students feel happy. Because everyone's coming to why is they want to spend time they are looking for spiritual fathers. But one thing that happens sometimes is when you come, the mashayikh are so busy that you don't have time to spend with them. And so his duty for all the students in Tarim is just to spend time. And that's his path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just spending time, treating them nicely, speaking to them, making them feel happy, welcoming them, right? And he's always inviting people to his home. In Ramadan, he has, mass iftars for all the students. And it gives the students a sense of belonging. That becomes his path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so every person has a different path. And therefore they would say the number or the ways, there are as many ways to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as there are breaths of human beings. You don't have to copy what someone else is doing. You need to find what your path is. And it might be different from someone else. And many times in the spiritual path as well, and even as students of knowledge, we are always comparing ourselves to others. This one read the book 1 year, or this one became Hafidh in 6 months, so I have to try and be the same. Oh, this person reached a certain level because he was doing. No. Use people's stories to give you himmah, to give you determination, right? But you don't have to be like people. Try and find what is your path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it might be something that no one else is doing. But when you do it, you'll feel in your heart directly that this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. It might mean you have to go and sweep your local masjid, right? It might mean that you just have to start smiling and treating the beggar a bit more amicably, not getting upset. It could be anything. You have to search for that path. And when you find that path, that becomes your fuel, and you use that for. And then also these things might differ from different stages in your life. Sometimes you find that this will be your path because you need to get to a place, and then it will change. So one of the students also, he mentioned that he reached a point where any dua that he made, any dua at all, within the day he saw the manifestation of the dua. Right? This was one of our revered Muslims when he came to Tarim, also a very spiritual person, right? But there was a period of about a year, right, that anything that he asked, anything at all that he asked for, he says he would see it manifest in front of him. He said it was so easy that he started to feel like now, and obviously this is his path now. He says, anything that I ask for happens, right? But then he starts feeling that, what, if Allah is giving me, then I need to have an adab and an etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of what I ask for, right? And then after a year or a couple of months after that he passed, he says, now when I make dua, it doesn't get accepted. But now I know how to make dua. And I'm not concerned about whether it's accepted or not, because I realize that the purpose of dua is those moments to be with Allah, not whether the dua was accepted or not. Right? And it's a path that actually goes. And Habib Ahmad Zain al-Habashi also mentions this in his interactions with Imam al-Haddad. Imam Ahmad Zain al-Habashi says he wrote a ruqya, certain ayat of the Quran, which sometimes it's like an amulet that they would tie, and this is also have sanctions, the Sahaba would do it as well, which was a cure for fever. And so it became known now that Habib Ahmad Zain al-Habashi, his amulets are guaranteed to get rid of fever. So people started to gather at his house, and he started to, and so in many months now people are being cured of fever immediately when. So he mentions one day to Imam al-Haddad that Alhamdulillah, this is what's happening. And he says, Imam al-Haddad just smiled at him. He says the next day he started writing the amulets, no effect. Right? No effect at all. And then he's trying whatever, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Right? And he comes and tells Imam al-Haddad smiles at him. And then he says how great was the tarbiyah of Imam al-Haddad, in that he didn't want my tawakkul to be in my ability, or I was in those. It's sometimes you do it, and the rest is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you tell people, this is just my effort, but the cure comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the trust needs to always be in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not in our own efforts. And then this next section, Habib Umar will speak about the qualities which a person needs to strive to attain in order to involve themselves in da'wah, and what is required, what are the states of heart and mind which a person needs to have when they are involved in da'wah. And when we say we're involved in da'wah, we're not talking about, a week from now you're going to now go out for da'wah or register, or meaning what we need to be doing in our daily interactions with people at work, at home, etc. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq, and we ask Him to allow us to use what's left of Ramadan in the best of ways. The last 10 days of Ramadan is the elixir, right? The last 10 days of Ramadan, people achieve, right, transformational things. If a person only realizes what it is, they would say, ذهب معظمه وبقي أعظمه. Most of it has passed, but the greatest is still left. And if a person has been on a program of ibadah and ta'ah in Ramadan, they just need to maintain that. If they haven't been on a program of ibadah and ta'ah, these last 10 days a person can rectify whatever deficiencies has come in. And if a person has this himmah and this determination and this longing and want to be able to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these last 10 days and to be able to find Laylatul Qadr, then that can be the night in which your entire life is transformed. Or you can start becoming means of other people's lives becoming transformed. If we learn, and that's the whole purpose of how Ramadan was established, and the Laylatul Qadr, or the Prophet ﷺ not, or the knowledge of it apparently being taken away, so that people can start learning how to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those that can't sit in i'tikaf for the whole 4 nights, they must make intention to sit for however many nights they can, however much time that they can spend in the masjid. The masajid, they're the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you find yourself in the masjid, make shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you are His guest and He has called you. And therefore, spending time in the masjid, Habib Abdullah bin Sayyid al-Tahiri would say, the masajid have such secrets that I am amazed at people that spend their time sitting at home. Right? You're sitting in the masjid, you are the guest of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What you want to achieve in your spiritual endeavors, right? Usually the masjid is the first place that you would achieve that. And if you haven't developed a relationship with the masjid, then there will always be a deficiency. One of the people who will be under the throne of the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah, when there will be no shade besides the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of those 7 people was who? Shabu ta'allaqa qalbahu bil masajid. That youth whose heart was connected to the masjid as well. And obviously women at home, they should allocate a portion in their house or in a room or somewhere. And really, even out of Ramadan, there should always be a portion in the room or in the house which is known for ibadah, meaning it becomes a sacred space. When people go into that area, they would behave just as they would behave as though they were in a masjid. To have idle talk, not to use their phones, right? It would only be a place of ibadah and worship and ta'ah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq, inshallah. Wa akhir da'wana, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asri, innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina